Welcome to the 18th season of the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Our NitWits panel includes Neil Riddell of the Altoona Mirror, Mark Brennan of FightOnState.com, Jacob Cowker of WTAJ Sports, and a special guest nitwit each week. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, an independent firm and firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Reed and Salini, Doctors Reed and Salini provide orthodontics for children and adults. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental. Buy what you want, rent what you need. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your cleaning needs. By Your Rehab Choice, Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
Well, Penn State coming up short over and over again against number 12 Michigan. We are the Nitwits here to break down the Nittany Lions' 28-16 loss. Neil Riddell from the Altoona Mirror, Mark Brennan from FightOnState.com, former Penn State wideout Joe Nastasi. Thanks for joining us, Joe. I am, of course, your host, Jacob Cowker. Let's start with Penn State's red zone struggles. 3 trips inside the 6, 3 field goals.
Well, I think one of the things that came out after the game was pretty insightful and true is James Franklin saying there's going to have to be some, quote, long conversations about the burning of timeouts. And it just seems there's some organizational issues offensively, particularly in key situations where these moments, unfortunately, are too big for them. And these long conversations, I think, are gonna really get to the heart of their procedure and their structure and why they repeatedly struggle in these types of situations.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes down to the offensive line, too. I mean, when you're in the 11th game of the season and changing offensive linemen in the third quarter, what is that telling you? The one thing that kind of bugged me about this game was leading up to it, all we heard from James Franklin is what a veteran team Michigan is and how young Penn State is. You know what? You have that. You're going to have to deal with that. And guess what? Their average age of their offensive line, just about 22 years old. So this is not a young group. They have to stop. He's creating excuses, and I wonder how much the players are hearing this and actually kind of buying into it, and when you get in these clutch situations, making mistakes. But to me, it really all comes down to that offensive line being unable to do anything, especially in the red zone.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, with this team, I think we're in a not sure what our identity is. I think a lot of it has to do with who are you when you get inside the 6. I mean, you see some teams, you see what Michigan does. They say, listen, we're going to run it at your face 4 times, and that's going to be what it is, so stop us. Stanford will do the same thing. Who we are, I'm not sure. You know, you get a team like Baylor, and they're going to have, 5 wides maybe on the field and run it with their quarterback. You just don't know. So right now I think it's more identity. We're not sure. I don't want to say we're not sure, but it's we haven't created that identity of who we are, and it really shows when that field condenses and you're inside in the red zone because that field gets smashed down, and you got to move guys around or spread them out.
Well, what about the audibles? I mean, it appeared that Christian checked into a couple runs. That didn't work. It just seems that, they run when you think maybe they should pass. They pass when you think maybe they ought to run. Well, neither's working, so it might not matter. But
I think the other dicey thing is some of these things worked against lesser teams. Now, I'm not sure Michigan's a top 12 team in the nation. That's a good team, but I don't think it's a great team.
It was beatable.
But it's a much better team than a lot of the teams that have played this year. I mean, let's face it. Who's their signature win this year? I mean, if you look at it, it's not as if they've beaten some great team. Maybe Indiana with its backup quarterback. So, my point being is that these things may have worked against the, Marylands and in Illinois and those types of teams. But
every
I think
other interim coach you faced.
Yeah, and then the other thing was, late in the game, they're in a situation where do you kick the field goal or do you go for the touchdown? Listen, people who were booing that they didn't go for the touchdown, did you really think that team had any chance of converting a two-point conversion? Yeah. And I think that probably played into it. Yeah, just because they were unable to do anything, as Joe said, when that field condensed, it was almost as if they would have had better opportunities from like the 15 or 20 than from the 6, 3, 4, 2.
Yeah, it seemed like with the way the momentum was at that point, the defense had been playing better, but it was all sucked away by that kickoff return. And that was for the second game in a row. You're seeing special teams really come up and bite this team hard. From that kickoff return to the muffed punt, both of those leading to a combined 14 points. That area, again, just a spot that biting Penn State in this loss.
Well, I mean, the muff punt, I feel bad for this kid. He's a young player, Tompkins, who is dying to get on the field. But he's bobbling fair catches. This is his 4th fumble. Finally, they did take him out, and it turns out to be the biggest play of the game. But when they do kick the field goal, and you need a play from your kickoff team, you don't get it.
Yeah.
There's no sense of situational
But
football.
listen, Neil, you go back to it kind of subconsciously there, saying he's a young player, same age as Jabril Peppers, who caught every single thing that was kicked at him.
Well, but I'm saying, though, here, I guess I mean the young player in the sense that he's only going to touch the ball 2 or 3 times. Peppers had his hand on the ball 20 times in that game.
Yeah. I mean, I like the field goal call. I totally agree with what they were trying to do there and say let's do it on a shutdown defense and really call for the defense to answer the bell one more time, because they could have created another turnover where anything could have happened. At that time, we had a 1-score game, 1-touchdown game. I like the call. That big kick return really hurt us. We had a lot of grabbing going on that kickoff. We had a handful of guys that could have made a play. And then obviously with, right after that, they had the momentum. It seems like this year we've struggled riding the momentum wave. Get the field goal, we're within 1. Get a kickoff, pin them down there, 3 and out, and here we go. We have a chance at it now. And it seems like in these bigger games, top 25 teams, we've struggled to ride that momentum wave.
Yeah, the kickoffs have been an issue all year. I mean, and I can't for the life of me figure out how you don't have somebody on that team who can kick the ball toward the end zone. I mean, I'm not saying through the end zone, but when they're fielding it at the 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-yard line. After the issues they had the previous week where the kid couldn't even, or 2 weeks earlier, where the kid could, he was inadvertently squibbing it.
Yeah.
The thing with the special teams, and this bothered me a little bit in this game, they block a punt, they do a great job, and I like Huff as a coach, but you don't celebrate like you won the national championship after you block a punt. I mean, I think that's sending the wrong message. Let's see some consistency.
He's been doing that all year.
But let's see some consistency from these special teams. Let's make 5 or 6 good plays before you do that, and let's not see this team not making 4 or 5 bad special teams plays.
You've had situations. You had a picture on the web where assistant coaches are jumping and
I'm okay with enthusiasm.
Okay, but I'm saying, is there an even keel?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you block a kick, which was great, but he's celebrated as if they had won a national title, and I don't think you want to do that. I mean, Joe, from your playing days.
Does that go back to that momentum wave as well then, too? I mean,
yeah, I mean, you got to be careful with being too high and too low. I mean, it's one of those things they talk about quarterbacks, really getting excited and celebrating the big throw, but be ready for the next play because you're only as good as your next play. And Joe always used to drill that into us. So some of us old school guys are saying, hey, look, we like it business-like, but we also like the enthusiasm. So, yeah, there's definitely a balance there.
All right, well, still ahead on the NitWits. Penn State's loss to Michigan was the last game in Beaver Stadium for 19 Nittany Lions seniors. There, of course, could be more. What about Christian Hackenberg? We'll offer our thoughts on if he should stay or go and what that would mean for the future at Penn State.
The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, an independent firm and firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Doctors Reed and Solani, orthodontics for children and adults. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona. Just ask rental. Buy what you want, rent what you need.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike the Mailman, and I'm watching the NitWits.
Everybody's watching the NitWits. A 12-point loss to Michigan in the home finale. Not exactly how Penn State wanted to send out its seniors. We know that the likes of Anthony Zettel, Carl Nass, Evangelo Mangiro, Trevor Williams, those 4 starters, they're not going to play again in Happy Valley. What about junior quarterback Christian Hackenberg?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, whatever Hackenberg decides, I mean, I think he's going to go down as one of the most important players in Penn State history. Not in the sense that he was the greatest quarterback. I know some people have tried to make that argument. But what he meant in terms of coming to this program after the sanctions hit and really establishing a good recruiting base. At this point, I wonder what else he really has to accomplish and how much more of a beating this guy could take. I thought it was interesting, Neil and Jacob, you were both there after the game, how Franklin talked about the beating this guy's taken the last 2 years. It was almost as if, I don't know if he was kind of foreshadowing something there, but would not be surprised at all if that was his last game at home for Penn State.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with Christian, I mean, again, you just said it, a lot of loyalty, a lot of guts. I mean, it took a lot for him to be that talented and then have to go through what he did, not only through the sanctions with Bill and then a coaching change again. He's an easy target. It's easy to blame him for a lot, and he's always manned up and said what he had to say. And how many people that are out there criticizing would have done the same thing in that situation? So, really, again, I think one of the most important players in Penn State history because of holding that together, the glue to hold that together.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to put it. Important, because I think that really sums it up, and it's very true. You look at this kid, and definitely he's not as accurate, and he makes some fatigue errors because he's just. I mean, this is 37 sacks. Last year was a disaster at 44, and they're on pace to surpass that. Mm-hmm. This kid is Rocky Balboa at times. I kind of felt bad for him at the very end. I mean, he was practically staggering around. I mean, he was going to go off, and they decided, obviously, not to punt. You could see his face when they zeroed in it. Brock Hewitt did an excellent job on the recap of Hackenberg's situation. I think it is time. I don't know what else he can gain, or if he can even keep him upright for another year. I'd like to see. I think I would wish him well to get on with it and see what he could do at the next level.
Well, and you really wonder how much better their offensive line's going to be next year too. I mean, that's the thing about it. And maybe a more mobile quarterback is a better fit in that system. And this isn't a knock on Christian Hackenberg. If he does decide to go, this could be a perfect opportunity for him to go be a backup somewhere. Mm-hmm. Maybe be a mid-round draft pick. I don't think it's going to be a high draft pick. I may be wrong unless he lights things on fire. But if he decides to do it, you could see. I mean, we saw it a couple years ago when he was in Bill O'Brien's kind of pure pro system, what this kid is capable of, and you just wonder what else he has to accomplish, in terms of his football future at this level.
And how much could you possibly rise that stock again? It's such a big gamble to where if he would go, I don't think anyone would say, man, like that's the absolute wrong decision. In fact, it's kind of pointing the opposite way that it seems like most people are thinking that would be the best decision for him.
Well, with the lack of great quarterbacking in the NFL, and when he gets to the combine and all his measurables and how smart he is, I just think that he will begin to have another career starting in December. And I just wonder, I don't think he would slip much below the second or at worst the third round.
Yeah, he's going to be one of these guys like Sean Lee or Michael Robinson, where you go from being a media guy who has to cover them objectively to being a fan. Wherever he goes, even if it's the hated Dallas Cowboys or Pittsburgh Steelers, I will be a Christian Hackenberg fan. Whenever he's in the NFL, it's going to be fun to watch him be a fan.
Yeah, I mean, I believe he's going to be a first rounder. I still do. I mean, he has the pro-style body and the pro-style arm. I think he's going to get in a system that's really going to work for him. And, you could see an Aaron Rodgers-style quarterback maybe getting a chance to play behind somebody for a year or two and then
well, if he goes late first round, he would have an opportunity to play behind some of the better quarterbacks, Drew Brees, but they're going to be picking probably fairly high.
Absolutely.
I guess the question, assuming for argument's sake that he is gone, what is the future, the immediate future for Penn State at that quarterback position, how it affects the play calling, and maybe the style of the offense next year and then in years after that?
Well, I mean, I think the kids that they have behind him right now are both more mobile than he is. Although, he did have, look at it, as soon as I say that, just makes me look like an idiot. But no, I mean, I think the two kids who are behind him are actually even more mobile than this, and they could do some more read option type things, which seems to be more in line with what this staff is capable of. Now, having said that, I think the staff, they're going to have to take a long look at their offensive staff in the offseason. I'm not saying they should I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is they're going to have to take a long look at what they're doing offensively in the offseason.
I agree, and I think some of that has to be procedural because they're not ready. They make a big play and they go rushing down to the 10-yard line, and then they have to call a timeout when the clock stops.
Yeah.
In fairness to them, when they get their guy in there who can move around a little better, I wonder if they should use McSorley in red zone packages these next couple games. At least a few times, A, to keep Hackenberg from getting killed, and B, to see what he has.
That's very difficult to do, and Joe could probably speak to this, but when you start talking about taking your veteran quarterback out and replacing him in any situation, that's a tough thing to do.
They pretty much do it when they send him to wideout.
Yeah.
Very good point. Well, still ahead on the Nitwits. More what ifs.
When Joe went out to wideout, they didn't guard him all the time.
That's right. That's right. It did happen against Ohio State.
That's right.
All right, well, let's keep things moving here on the Nitwits. Some more what ifs from Penn State's loss to Michigan. We'll search for maybe one area that the Nittany Lions can build up or build on as they gear up for the season finale.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Monarch Cleaners for all your cleaning needs. By your rehab choice, Health South Altoona. Ask for us by name. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life.
Now back to the Nitwits. A roundtable discussion of Penn State football.
All right, Penn State now has 4 losses on the year. 3 of those are to teams in the top 25. My question is, through 11 games, have we seen this team progress, get better over that course of time now that the season is almost wrapped up?
You know, I think they have, maybe not necessarily against these top 25 teams, but then again, you know, we really, again, we're young. You know, we're dealing with an offensive line that has some challenges. So if you look at like the Indiana and Illinois game, I mean, you can take a lot of positives out of that where we really handled it like we should have. So to me, as time went on, you saw those kind of games, the ones we were to capture and win convincingly, we have. Maybe not the best time to talk about it after like the Michigan game here where you're saying, hey, we had an opportunity with the momentum, but you saw times when we had, I don't want to say lesser opponents, but maybe not the top tier opponents where we have done better and convincingly handled games.
I think progress on defense. They've consistently made pretty good adjustments and responded well to injuries. You didn't have Nassib, your best player on defense yesterday. Lucas, I think they've showed timely blitzes. It's not been a great year, even on that side of the ball. They haven't quite been ready, have some slow starts. They didn't finish the half well. But just body of work, I think defense continues to progress.
It's hard to judge this question because the schedule's so backloaded. I mean, I think you talk about Michigan and Northwestern, to me, both ended up being better than I thought they would be. Mm-hmm. We knew the back end of the schedule was going to be even tougher. The one thing I would say about that Michigan game, listen, they had every opportunity to kind of roll over there, and they fought back. And now, granted, things fell apart at the end, but at least they put themselves in position to win that game midway through the fourth quarter. I'm sorry. And the fact that it didn't happen, obviously, if you're a Penn State fan, you wish it would have, but they kept fighting, and I give them credit for that in that game.
Yeah, really, it kind of, in the start of the second half into the third quarter, it really felt like, is this the moment when Michigan was going to seal the deal and just deliver that nail in the coffin? And it really was until that big kick return that led to that touchdown that really kind of.
But I mean, they pretty much had a cannon blowing their foot off every time with 13 penalties. This is 2 weeks in a row.
We're trying to be positive here, Neil.
Well, I'm saying Michigan.
However,
and another thing.
Well, that's why we keep them around. We like to have some perspective here. I guess now with 2 games left on the schedule, and that was one.
Thank you for keeping me around. You're about our 8th host.
Well, maybe. Thank you for keeping me around, I guess I should say. But with 2 games left on the schedule, is there one area that you can pick out and say, from this Michigan game, that's one area where you at least see a building block heading into Michigan State and the bowl game, or is there none?
No, you know what? I will say this. I thought the backup defensive linemen at times in that game, when they really needed them because Nassib was out, I thought some of those young defensive ends played well. I think there's some hope for that defensive line next year, even though they're going to lose Nassib and Zettel and maybe Austin Johnson as well. So I thought you saw some positives there in terms of more depth than maybe I thought maybe they would have had.
Torrance Brown.
I totally agree. And back to what you were saying about being in the fight. There's a lot to be said about that. Even the Ohio State game, I mean, without that hold call and some of that. Look, this team has had some guts. So I mean, we've got to really look at this like a building block and say, yeah, now we got to learn how to finish the deal. And that's what really good teams do. They finish the deal. But being in the fight and having an opportunity, yeah, I agree 100% that is a very positive in the mindset of these kids.
Neil's waiting with his wet blanket. What are you going to throw on top?
I'm deferring to Jake.
Okay, well then Joe will be the last words of that segment. Speaking of finishing the deal, they've got one game left in the regular season. Our predictions for that regular season finale coming up here on the Nitwits.
The Nitwits are brought to you by EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State game day every Friday.
Penn State heading to the banks of the Red Cedar, East Lansing, Michigan, to play a surging Michigan State team. Our predictions, we'll start with Mark Brennan.
Yeah, you know, Michigan.
Nitwit of the week.
Oh, thank you very much, Neil. You're not going to throw a wet blanket on that, too? Listen, hey, Michigan State, I thought this would have been a pretty good matchup for Penn State with Cook because he wasn't as mobile. Now you don't know who they have at quarterback. They go and they beat Ohio State. They're right back in it, not only to play in the Big Ten championship game, but possibly to get back in the Final Four. So Michigan State has so much on the line here. Always been a tough trip for Penn State. I think it's going to be a tough game. Michigan State 27, Penn State 13.
Neil?
You know, I agree with all that. The fact that they're coming off this huge win in Ohio State, though, there may be a slight little they're not going to be able to reach that emotional peak. I think Penn State's defense will play with character as it has. I say Michigan State 19, Penn State 10.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, you want to say it might be the Ohio State hangover, but, you know, there's a lot at stake here all the way around. So I think that Michigan State's going to play well, and you don't know who's going to be the quarterback, but we're the wounded dog, so I'm going 2019 Penn State.
Ooh.
Joe,
nice.
Representing the chair.
That's right.
And I am picking last, and this was predetermined. Mark, you actually took my pick on.
Oh, I hear what's coming here.
So
Adjust, Jake. Adjust.
Because here's
Lower, go lower.
Because again, what I
Squeeze
think
Neil.
is this. What I think is this is that Michigan's. I thought this game could have possibly been close until Michigan State is now in this playoff race.
Neil
so
threatened to throw you off the show.
They come off big time. I think Michigan State wins 28-13 over Penn State. That'll do it on this week of the Nitwits. We'll see you next time.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, an independent firm and firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Reed and Salaney, Doctors Reed and Salaney provide orthodontics for children and adults. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona. Just ask rental. Buy what you want, rent what you need. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your cleaning needs. By Your Rehab Choice, Health South Altoona. Ask for us by name. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State game day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday. You can also see the Nitwits on AltoonaMirror.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next week.